First thing today by Joe Thomas. Thank you for joining in with us. Big victory for one of the monsters that honestly, if you're not looking for them, they're little and it seems like it's running around in the bottom, but they're sent out by the queen of ranked choice voting. I call her that because she looks a little like Helena Bonham Carter's version of the Queen of Hearts from Tim Burton's retelling of Alice in Wonderland. She is Sally Hudson, former member of the Virginia General Assembly, who's one of the queens of trying to get ranked choice voting passed all over the place so that nobody will ever know who gets elected and they can just tell us it's this person. And joining us, Jason Snead from the Honest Elections Project. Jason, thank you first for joining us, but also congratulations on big victories in Kansas. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on the program, and thank you for the congratulations. Although the credit really goes to Kansas lawmakers who just within this last couple of days became the 14th state to ban ranked choice voting, and they also closed a crucial foreign funding loophole to help protect the integrity of their constitutional amendment process as well. So some big victories in Kansas and in states across the country.
So here in Virginia, we're jealous. I'm not too shallow to admit it because I'm not necessarily speaking on behalf of them, but it passed a similar bill passed through our General Assembly to put ranked choice voting into the Commonwealth Code, and the governor vetoed it. And I can only imagine what a different governor, wink, wink, starting next year might do if given the same General Assembly. Talk about the messaging that was necessary to make sure that these General Assembly members didn't fall prey to the siren song of, but it's inclusive. I even have Republicans, Jason, telling me, no, ranked choice voting gives Republicans a chance to beat Democrats in places like Northern Virginia. Jason, tell us how you did it?
Well, the first and most important thing to keep in mind is who is behind ranked choice voting. That's a big tell. All of the money behind ranked choice voting is coming from the left. It's coming from big left-wing mega donors like George Soros and his friends. It's an idea that has been created by folks on the left. And of course, they're going to be pushing an idea that's going to help the left. And that's what ranked choice voting really is all about. It's about fundamentally changing our elections in ways that are designed to push politics to the left. Now, what they have done, which is different from what the left has done in other fights in the election integrity space, like voter ID or non-citizen voting, they have put a concerted effort behind the attempt to convince Republicans and conservatives that ranked choice voting is actually a bipartisan idea. So they
Mm.
have created AstroTurf organizations that are nominally nonpartisan, but again, all of the funding is coming from the left. They have recruited former Republican members of legislatures in states all across the country, recruited lobbyists that have close ties to Republican officials. They have really made this concerted attempt to get the camel's nose under the tent. And that's why you're hearing, even from some, Republicans, even from some rock-ribbed conservatives, very nice things about ranked choice voting. They don't ultimately always understand where this idea originates, where the funding for it is coming from. And one of the things I often tell folks is, some of this money is coming from George Soros and people like him. What interest does George Soros have in getting a conservative elected anywhere in this country? The answer is zero. And ranked choice voting is one of these ideas which is designed to make that ambition of having essentially zero conservatives anywhere in government happen. But there's a lot of also real policy problems that we can get into, hopefully, as well, about why ranked choice voting makes it harder to vote, makes it harder to trust the results. And as you said, it basically turns elections into a black box where people can't even necessarily remember who they voted for, much less know who their ballot actually was counted for.
Well, and that's one of the examples, and we've talked to our mutual friend Hans von Spakovsky on this subject. I grew up in New York City, and New York City is not a trusting bunch, and they have watched ranked choice voting for their city offices just turn into a nightmare time and time again, and they're backing away from it. Tell us about some of the horror stories in ranked choice voting, so people realize it's a siren song.
Yeah, so ranked choice voting, for anyone that doesn't know what this is, it replaces one person, one vote elections, which we think of as pretty much the standard election in this country, with a system where you have multiple candidates running. Usually it's what they call a final five system. So you have five people running in an election, but there's not any absolutely necessary reason that it has to be five. New York City, for instance, doesn't have that limit. So you can have any number of candidates running. And then you
Mhm.
rank them in order of preference. And the idea here, according to the RCV proponents, is that you should win elections with majority support. So what they want to do is basically only get majoritarian candidates elected. But the problem is that with any election system, if you don't get an actual majority of the votes, then you have to basically manufacture an artificial majority. And that's why ranked choice voting has you order all of your candidates in preference. So if nobody gets over 50% of the first place vote in a particular election, then they're going to identify the candidate that got the fewest first place votes, eliminate that person, and then any ballot cast for that candidate gets shifted to the voter's next highest pick. And you do this process, rinse, wash, and repeat over and over until you manufacture that majority. And along the way, you're discarding ballots that are what they call exhausted because not everybody ranks every candidate. Newsflash, there's a lot of people running for office that we disagree with and we don't want to risk our vote getting counted for. And
Exactly.
if you run out of candidate rankings before you get a winner, then your ballot is exhausted and it's eliminated. In fact, it's not just eliminated, it's like you never voted because it actually drops out of the total votes cast in an election. So it's a completely bizarre situation where you're asked to rank multiple candidates, including candidates that are fringe and unelectable, but for ranked choice voting. You have to do
Mhm.
this for
Mhm.
every race on the ballot. So in a final five system, you're ranking five people in each race. The average ballot in this country has 17 candidate races. That means you're learning about and ranking 85 people every time you're going to vote. And then you
Wow.
have to go through this process of collecting and tabulating those ballots. It is prone to delay. It is prone to error, and it turns your elections into a black box. Good luck remembering who you voted for in third place in the 16th race that you voted for on a particular ballot, and then going through and trying to reverse engineer the process to see who your ballot actually got counted for. There are all sorts of problems. And in fact, it's so difficult to run that out in Oakland, California, just a couple of years ago, there was a screw up in the process, and tabulators made an error that ended up leading to the wrong person getting declared the winner of a local race. And they didn't catch the mistake until an outside audit by RCV experts came in and found out that they had made this mistake. So in the end, it took 4 months and a lawsuit to seek the true winner. And that in a nutshell is ranked choice voting.
It's interesting because the proponents of ranked choice voting are the ones who will loudly get on network television claiming that the Trump administration is creating chaos. Yet, this, in every instance I've seen it, Jason, you were just talking about 4 months, 4 months to get an election. I doubt Oaklanders like that very much. That is chaos, and it seems like the opponents of chaos are actually the progenitors of chaos.
Well, it certainly is the case with ranked choice voting that this makes the process harder in every way. It makes it harder for voters, particularly constituencies that we would sort of think of as vulnerable voters. Imagine a senior citizen in a nursing home getting essentially a scroll of a ballot in the mail and having to go through
Hmm.
80 or 90 candidates and figure out first, second, third, fourth for each of those.
No.
Imagine the vulnerability there if a ballot harvester were to come through your nursing home offering to help you fill out your ballot.
Mhm.
There's all those sorts of problems, and I think it is deeply ironic that the political left, which says that it is too difficult and too cumbersome for somebody to reach into their pocket, pull out their ID, and show it before they cast a ballot, thinks that this system, ranked choice voting, is
Mm.
perfectly fine and that everybody should be doing it. And here's the real kicker. There are a few types of local elections in Virginia. I'm also in the Commonwealth that you can use ranked choice voting. In Arlington, Virginia, just outside of
Mhm.
DC, was the first to use this, and they used it in the Democratic primary for the Arlington County Board a couple of years ago. And they were debating after that election, should we start using ranked choice voting for all elections? And you know what some of the folks said, even on the Arlington County Board, they said, no, we're going to keep it exclusively to the Democratic primary because those are more educated and informed voters. And it's just not, we can't trust the voters who come out in a general election to be able to use this system. So I think that is an eye-opening statement. You should not have a system of voting that is so complicated that even the people proposing this say it's more complicated and maybe it's too complicated for some folks.
In their own words, Jason Snead, Honest Elections Project. Are there, just to play devil's advocate for a moment, are there places on planet Earth where ranked choice voting has worked? Or is this just a fever dream of the Charles Dodgson Brigade? Charles Dodgson, for the second time, we'll mention Alice in Wonderland. He is a political theorist who wrote a little bit under the pseudonym Lewis Carroll for a while. So yes, this kind of democracy by committee is the fever dream of the same mind that gave you the Queen of Hearts and Alice in Wonderland. But is there any place that this actually has worked in the past?
Well, not that I've seen. In fact, it has been rejected in a bunch of places that have actually tried ranked choice voting. Utah is an example of this phenomenon. There are lots of pro RCV groups that will tout Utah as a supposed success for RCV. They have a pilot program that lets cities try this out. At the peak of that program, they got about 2 dozen cities to experiment with ranked choice voting. And in the end, half of those jurisdictions walked away because all of the promises of ranked choice voting, it was going to cost less, it was going to be easy, all of those promises, they never materialized, and so they all walked away. And now that pilot program is going to expire at the end of this year, which means there will be no more ranked choice voting in the state of Utah. Last year, we saw the left spend $100 million on ballot measures to push ranked choice voting into 6 states. All of them were rejected by the voters. And in Alaska, they spent about $15 million to prevent the state from walking away from ranked choice voting. They had a repeal effort on the ballot against about $100,000 spent by our side. And we ended up losing that repeal fight by just 700 votes. So think about that. They had to spend $15 million to keep this system in place, and they only won by 700 votes. That's how unpopular this system is. Now, one of the fables, one of the fictions that we have heard is that in a lot of states, the military is using ranked choice voting. And, there are a lot of southern states that have runoff requirements, and so if you don't get over 50%, you have a second
Georgia.
election. And we
Georgia's
and we
one of
have a
one of the most
right.
notable ones. Georgia's Senate race a few years ago was one of the more notably national ones.
That's correct, exactly. Ballots to military and overseas voters 45 days before the election. So, what some states have said is, in order to give our military the maximum opportunity to vote, but to also make sure that we have a runoff election close to the original so we don't have to wait 6 or 8 weeks to do it, we're going to send the military essentially two ballots. We're going to send them a regular ballot, and then we're going to send them a second ballot that says, if there's a runoff, we want you to rank the candidates, first to last so that
Okay.
we know who your vote is going to be cast for. And what we've seen is that the RCV guys will say this is ranked choice voting and it works so well for the military, but it's not. Asking somebody to rank who their vote would be in the event of a runoff between two people is vastly different from a system that says from the jump, we're going to rank everybody and then we're going to put it all into an algorithmic black box and it's going to spit out a result. And maybe, your vote's going to count for your fourth place candidate. That is ranked choice voting, and what these military guys are using is not. So that's one of the fictions we've heard, but really ranked choice voting has failed in every place it's tried.
I'm glad you told that story, Jason. Jason Snead on with us from the Honest Elections Project, because here in Virginia, and being a Virginian, you've probably heard this as well. Well, you Republicans used ranked choice voting back in your 2021 nominating convention, which we did because we were not allowed to hold an in-person convention. So we used a ranked ballot in order to equate to what would happen in a convention if you don't have a clear winner. Same idea as a runoff, and so in an effort to under COVID, this was my argument was just show up. Let's see Virginia arrest every Republican in the state and see how that goes. But they wouldn't do it. So they held this decentralized firehouse primary style voting system, and in it you were given a ranker ballot, and they use that to try to say that Republicans have already accepted ranked choice voting. It was just a capitulation to COVID-19 and the restrictions on big gatherings in an effort to, as you said, be able to say, okay, on the second ballot who's the leader, and on the third ballot who's the leader. And I think they wound up having to go through 3 rounds of dropouts before they finally wound up with Governor Youngkin, but it still was not ranked choice voting. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, we've heard that one, that particular story peddled all over the country as well. That somehow ranked choice voting gave Virginia Governor Youngkin, and he would not have won except for ranked choice voting. And I always remind them, you're 100% right. The only reason this was used was because a Democratic governor would not allow the normal convention to proceed, so they had to do something. And if you actually go and look at the results, Ballotpedia actually has a great article about this, process, and you can see all the way through. Governor Youngkin was in the lead of every single round, so he didn't
Right.
win because of ranked choice voting. He won in spite of it. And I have talked to people that were involved in that convention, that were involved in the tabulation of that ranked choice result, and they said it made it so much harder. It made it harder for the people that were counting the votes. It made it harder for the candidates. It did not do anything to improve that process. And it is not some, and that was a process, as you know, the convention's relatively small compared to a statewide election. And
Exactly.
it was difficult enough with a very small, concentrated pool of folks. Now we're trying to push this into states where you're getting millions of votes cast in every election. It's just not ready for prime time, and it never will be.
Jason, I want to bring in a second story before we let you go, and we appreciate your time here. Oregon, of all places, is has a bill in front of its General Assembly to end its mail-in balloting system. It's one of the oldest mail-in balloting states in the country. And they always say, but we have such high voter turnout. I said, well, you have high ballot turnout. I haven't seen a voter attached to them, but that's a whole other matter for my friends in Portland. Um, could there be a worse combination than to have ranked choice voting in a state that allows ballots to arrive from wherever, whenever, from whoever?
Well, it's actually really hard to imagine a worse combination because, here's where you run into problems. First of all, ranked choice voting is a much more complicated system from the voter's perspective. And you already have a problem with mail voting where if you inadvertently vote for two people in a race, we call that an overvote. Or if you forget to vote for somebody in a race, we call that an undervote. And then you mail in your ballot, there's no way to catch that problem and then identify the voter and go back to them and say, okay, you actually made a mistake, right? So the only thing you can do at that point is essentially ignore that vote for that race, and that person never knows that their vote didn't count for president or senate or governor or whatever it happens to be. Now you've got ranked choice voting, which means that the opportunities for error are substantially increased,
Mhm.
and those are going to be errors that you could fix at a polling place, but you can't fix with mail voting. And here's the other piece of this too that we have to remember: a lot of states that do all mail elections allow ballots to come in after election day. And with ranked choice voting, you have to centralize the tabulation, and you can't really actually tabulate the results until every ballot is received.
Sure.
So if you live in a state like California, for instance, that let ballots come in up to a week late, you can't even tabulate the results for a week after the election. Alaska allows ballots to come in for 15 days after an election. And guess what? We didn't know the results of any of their races until 15 days after the election. So there's lots and lots of problems here. And from the voters' perspective, they may not know for sure if their vote was counted or who it was counted for, right? Remember, we're talking about ballots that could have 80 or 90 candidates that you have to rank. And you might remember, who you ranked for president, who you ranked for Senate, but will you remember the order that you ranked your local city council members in, or school board, or any of those, 16th, 17th, 18th races on the ballot? That's going to be a real problem from the perspective of transparency and voter confidence in the results of our elections. We won't understand why certain people are winning when it looked like they were losing, and we may not even know who our vote was ultimately counted for.
I'm going to ask you this, and I'm going to accept an abstention from the answer because it involves hypotheticals and skullduggery, and there's nothing more fun in my world than hypothetical skullduggery, um, other than saying it successfully anyway. Jason, but we see instances where candidates will run against somebody in a primary. And in some cases, it's patently obvious they're there to pull votes away from, and they've been promoted by one party or another. We've seen instances where political parties have said, hey, go vote in the Republican primary because we'd rather candidate X than candidate Y, so on and so forth. Operation Chaos. It's been promoted by the conservatives as well to mess around. In a case with ranked choice voting, and you have all these candidates, it's not even the ranking; it's the opportunity to just have Johnny bar the door number of candidates. You really also redouble the opportunity for that kind of shenanigan going on, don't you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have to remember that one of the reasons that the big mega donors on the left are pushing ranked choice voting is that it weakens parties. Now, most people don't really like the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. Everybody has their beef with the political parties. But you have to remember that when you create a power vacuum, something is going to fill that vacuum, right? And who's going to do that? Who is going to have the resources and the political infrastructure and the clout to fill a power vacuum when the political parties are weakened? It's going to be the very mega donors that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on ideas like ranked choice voting. They're literally trying to buy a new election system. Why is this important? Well, it's because those are some of the same folks that are engaging in some of the skullduggery that you were just talking about. It gives them more control over the process of picking who's going to run, and they can, with a ranked choice voting system, if a liberal mega donor wants to make sure that a center left candidate is going to win in a particular place, then they can put a lot of money into the center left candidate, but then they can also recruit a progressive and a socialist to make that person look positively moderate. And then they can essentially skew the results that way. There's lots of gaming that can go into this type of a system. And by increasing the cloud of these, dark money mega donors in our political process, you're inviting that level of gamesmanship into our politics. So again, ranked choice voting fails on every metric, and it certainly fails on the question of transparency. And it exposes our system to a whole slew of new tactics like that most people think are unbecoming and not really befitting a democracy or a democratic process like ours.
Absolutely, unless it's one of my guys doing it. No. Jason Snead, what are you working on right now before we let you go? Congratulations again on Kansas and both blocking foreign manipulation monies in the processes, but also to keep ranked choice voting out. What's next for you?
Well, we're pushing hard to get some more ranked choice voting bans done in states across the country. We've got, as I said, 14 states that have done this. That's three states this year alone that have passed bans. And then foreign funding. There's a loophole that actually lets foreign nationals finance ballot issue campaigns. They can't give to a candidate, but they can give to a constitutional amendment process. And we've seen the left take an extraordinary amount of money, about $300 million into a single left-wing group from a Swiss billionaire named Hans-Jörg Wyss. And then that group has spent $130 million on left-wing ballot measures, locking abortion into state constitutions, rewriting voting laws, and so forth. So we think that foreign nationals should not be able, under any circumstances, directly or indirectly, to influence the constitutions of our states. So we've been working all over the country. Right now, we've actually got 15 states this year that have introduced bans on this type of foreign funding for ballot measures. And we've had three states enact them this year. And we're waiting on Indiana to potentially become the fourth. They sent a ban to their governor last week. So we're working to close that foreign funding loophole in ballot measures. And we've got a bunch of other exciting election integrity stuff in the works as well.
Well, you keep us in the loop on it. It's honestelections.org, correct?
That's right,
Okay.
honestelections.org. And we're also on Twitter or X and Facebook at Honest Elections. I encourage everyone to follow us.
Jason Snead, thank you for joining us this week.
Thank you.
Subscribe to get the news the legacy media won't tell you and only the Daily Signal can bring to you.